Okay, let's talk about this massive shift that happens right in the middle of the 1960s. We're going to get into psychedelic rock.
Right. It was a style of popular music that just exploded almost at the same time in both the US and the UK.
And it completely changed the game. It wasn't just about the sound of rock music, it was about its whole purpose.
It was a total revolution. I mean, musicians really saw this as a way to create a soundtrack for, well, for exploring different ways of thinking.
It was a huge pushback against the kind of simple love songs that were all over the radio.
Exactly. Before about 1965, rock was mostly music for dancing. 3 minutes, a simple beat, and that was it.
And then all of a sudden, bands are pushing every limit they can find in the studio, on the stage. The whole idea of what a rock band could even do just changed.
And that change really starts with the tools they were using. The whole anatomy of the sound had to be reinvented.
Let's start with the big one, the electric guitar. It's still the heart of the sound, but its job is completely different.
It's not about clean, simple chords anymore, not at all. It's all about creating textures.
So how did they get that sound, that really distinctive, aggressive tone?
It came down to new technology, mainly effects pedals. When we talk about distortion, for example, it's not just a crunchy sound.
Right.
They were pushing amplifiers way past their limits, using circuits like the fuzz pedal to get this saturated, almost violin-like sound that could sustain a note forever.
And the wah-wah pedal.
Oh, the wah-wah was huge. It lets you sweep through frequencies up and down, and it kind of mimics the human voice. It makes the guitar sound like it's talking or, even screaming.
So the effects weren't just an add-on. They were basically part of the instrument's voice.
Absolutely essential. And beyond the guitar, the keyboards became just as important for creating that atmosphere.
You hear those organs on so many tracks.
Yeah, the Farfisa or the Vox Continental organs, they have this kind of thin, reedy sound, and when you drench them in echo, they created that constant swirling background that just fills up all the space. It's hypnotic.
And as the sound got bigger, the influences got wider. They started looking way outside of typical rock music.
That's when you start hearing instruments from other cultures, like the Indian sitar. That was the most famous one.
And that sound immediately tells you that this is something different, something exotic.
Yeah, and even the rhythm section got a major upgrade. The bass guitar stopped being just a background instrument.
It wasn't just thump, thump, thump anymore.
No way. Bass players like Jack Bruce from Cream were playing these incredibly complex melodic lines that would weave in and out of the guitar parts. The bass basically became a second lead instrument.
And the drums.
The drums got the full studio treatment. They'd put so much heavy echo on them, not just to make them loud, but to create this feeling of huge open space.
Like the whole band was playing in some giant canyon or a cathedral.
Precisely. And that really brings us to the most revolutionary part of this whole era, the recording studio itself.
This is where things get really interesting. The studio wasn't just a place to capture a performance.
No, it became an instrument. A massive, complicated instrument that the band and the engineers could play.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of that, the actual techniques they were pioneering.
We can start with something like tape loops. This is a really physical process. You'd record a sound, a little musical phrase, onto a piece of tape.
And then literally loop it.
Literally cut it and splice the ends together to make a circle. Then you just let it play over and over in the background, creating this trance-like rhythmic layer.
Wow. And then you had reversal techniques.
Even stranger. The engineer would physically flip the reel of tape over, so the music would be recorded backward onto the final track. It's a sound that's just inherently unnatural to the human ear.
It's immediately jarring.
In a really cool way. And then you have the really technical sounding stuff like phasing and flanging.
Right. Those words sound like they're from a physics textbook, but they create that classic dizzy, swirling sound. How did that work?
Well, they both work by splitting the audio signal in two and then delaying one side just a tiny, tiny bit before mixing them back together.
Okay.
With flanging, which can sound like a jet plane taking off, they would sometimes do it by hand just by pressing a finger on the edge of the tape reel.
No way.
Yeah. Phasing is a bit more electronic, using circuits to create these really complex, sweeping textures. It gives you the feeling that the sound itself is moving through water or air.
And that idea of moving sound was so important, especially with the vocals.
Definitely. They used echo chambers, which were actual physical rooms with reflective walls, to give vocals that dreamy, distant, almost ghostly quality.
The singer sounds like they're far away.
And if you were at home listening on the new stereo headphones, nothing was more powerful than stereo panning.
Where they move a sound from the left speaker all the way over to the right.
Exactly. A guitar riff, a cymbal crash, it would just fly from one ear to the other.
Hmm.
It was a conscious effort to create this spinning sensation inside your head to make the experience totally immersive.
This wasn't just recording music. It was building a world out of sound.
And a lot of that world building was inspired by a fascination with Eastern cultures. The influence of Indian classical music was just enormous.
Why India, specifically?
Well, a lot of musicians in the 60s were looking for ideas, both philosophical and musical, that were outside the Western tradition they grew up with. Indie music was less about a quick 3-minute structure and more about achieving a state of reflection.
So what were the key ideas they brought over?
The most obvious one is the sitar. Its sound is so complex and shimmering, it just instantly gives you that feeling of something transcendent.
And then you have drones.
Yes, drones. These are long, continuous notes that are held all the way through a piece of music. In Western pop, the chords are always changing, but a drone gives you this steady, unmoving foundation. It kind of encourages you to just settle in.
And that led to a totally different song structure.
Yeah.
Based on what are called raga scales.
Exactly. Ragas are melodic frameworks, but they sound completely different from the major or minor scales we're used to. They use different notes, different intervals.
And that changed the whole point of the music, right?
It did. It shifted from being for dancing to being for, meditation or deep thinking.
Which means the 3-minute pop song format just wouldn't work anymore.
Right. It led to much longer instrumental sections. Bands realized they could just improvise for minutes at a time, building and releasing tension very slowly. The tempo often got slower, too, just creating more space for the sounds to breathe.
Okay, so we've got the sound. Let's talk about where it came from. Because there were really two main centers of creativity, Great Britain and the U.S., and they sounded pretty different.
Very different. The UK scene, mostly in London, was often more intellectual, I guess, and sometimes just weirder. It had this whimsical, almost fairy tale quality to it.
The Beatles' album Revolver is kind of seen as the starting gun for the whole thing.
For sure. But then you get Pink Floyd, who are the ultimate example of that UK approach. Really long, experimental, spacey music with these deep philosophical lyrics.
And Cream, who took American blues and just stretched it out into these 15-minute improvisations.
And of course, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, an American guitarist who had to move to London to become a superstar.
And the place where all this was happening was a venue called the UFO Club.
That was the heart of the London underground scene. But then you jump across the Atlantic to San Francisco, and the whole vibe changes.
If London was whimsical, San Francisco was.
Energetic, rebellious, and a lot louder. It really reflected that anti-establishment spirit you had on the West Coast.
And the center of that universe was the Haight-Ashbury district.
Right. That's where the fashion, the philosophy, and the sound all came together to basically define the whole hippie movement.
And the key bands there were people like Jefferson Airplane.
With their powerful female vocals singing about social change and freedom. And then you have the Grateful Dead.
The ultimate jam band.
The ultimate jam band. Their live shows were these incredibly long, loose, improvised experiences. Every single concert was a one-of-a-kind event.
And the main venue for all this was the Fillmore Auditorium, which was famous for its liquid light shows.
Yes. And that really proves that psychedelic rock was never just about the music you were hearing.
It was about the whole sensory experience, which is the perfect transition because you can't understand this movement without talking about the visual side.
Absolutely not. The goal was total immersion, and those liquid light shows were a huge part of it.
What were they exactly?
It was a live performance. People would use overhead projectors with glass dishes filled with colored oils and dyes. They'd manipulate them by hand so the colors would flow and bubble and swirl on a giant screen behind the band, moving with the music.
So it's like a visual representation of the sound.
That's it. And that whole visual approach bled into everything, especially the poster art for the shows.
The posters are iconic.
Yeah, they became their own art form. They used these screaming bright neon colors and lettering that was so curvy and organic it was sometimes hard to even read. The goal was to make the image itself seem like it was vibrating.
And the album covers, too. They were pieces of art that you'd stare at for hours while you listened.
The goal was to overload your eyes just as much as your ears. And the lyrics went through that same transformation.
No more simple rhymes.
No. Songwriters started focusing on really complex themes: dreams, philosophy, the mysteries of the mind, nature.
There are a lot of references to things like Alice in Wonderland, right?
Sure.
Describing these strange, shifting worlds.
All the time. It gave the music a very serious intellectual reputation, but it was also very focused on social issues, two-piece, protesting the war, hoping for a better future.
And that reputation was also built on just pure musical skill. We mentioned the jam session, and we should probably stress how important that was.
Oh, for bands like the Grateful Dead or Cream, the jam was everything. It's pure, spontaneous creation.
20 minutes or more where the band has no pre-written plan.
They're just listening and reacting to each other in real time. It takes an incredible amount of skill and a kind of telepathic connection between the musicians. No two performances were ever the same.
And that was a huge break from the 3-minute pop single.
It was a complete rejection of it, and it directly led to the rise of genres like progressive rock, with its super long conceptual tracks.
And this whole movement didn't stay in small clubs for very long. It scaled up big time.
It exploded onto the world stage through music festivals. They became the defining way people experienced the music.
You're talking about Monterey Pop in '67 and, of course, Woodstock in '69.
These massive gatherings helped create a real sense of community. Hundreds of thousands of people, all there for the same reason. They were essential for launching bands into superstardom.
But to put on a show for that many people, I mean, the sheer physical scale of the equipment they needed is mind-blowing.
It's insane. The professional amplifiers, like a Marshall stack, could weigh over 80 pounds each.
So you're not just throwing gear in a van anymore. You need road crews and trucks.
Right. And you needed speaker cabinets with multiple 12-inch speakers just to handle the power and volume.
And to get that sound to the back of a giant field in a festival, you needed thousands and thousands of watts of power.
These sound systems were being invented and built specifically for these events. It forced the whole live sound industry to professionalize basically overnight.
So when we look back at this incredible burst of creativity, the innovation, the art, the sheer scale of it all, what do you think is the real lasting legacy of psychedelic rock?
Well, its influence is everywhere. I mean, the sounds themselves, the echo, the phasing, you still hear that all over modern, alternative, indie, and electronic music. It made it normal to think of sound as a texture.
But I think the bigger legacy is the philosophy behind it.
I agree. It's the idea that a band should always be experimenting, always pushing forward, that a record isn't just a recording of a song, but a work of art that you construct.
That idea is just accepted now. It's what serious artists are expected to do.
And so many albums from that time are still seen as some of the greatest ever made. The art, the fashion, it all still inspires people today.
It really was a moment that showed how music, art, and technology could all come together to completely change the culture.
Yeah, it forced everyone to ask a new question. What happens when music stops being just background noise and starts becoming a world you can step inside?
See you next time.